Welcome to Lighten Up TV, enlightening, inspiring, and empowering humanity. This is a journey of self-discovery. On this journey, we are in search of answers to the burning questions that have intrigued mankind for millennia. Who are we? Where did we come from? Why are we here? And where are we going? By merging scientific discoveries with spiritual revelations, we will explore the possibility that mind and matter are one and the same in a vibratory field of pure consciousness. What if this eternally expanding field of consciousness is of and from the same source? These revelations, that we may actually share one mind in a unified field that expands into the cosmos, has the potential to cause a powerful shift in the collective consciousness. On our fascinating journey, we will explore ancient legends, modern discoveries, and emerging truths about the spiraling creative forces that spun this creation into being. From spirituality to religion, superstring theory to the Big Bang, from gods and goddesses to angels and aliens, we will dive into the mysteries of creation. Are you ready to lighten up?
Starring your host, Suzanne Ross, television personality and producer, inspirational author and speaker. She is a 5D truth seeker and spiritual pioneer on the front lines, raising the frequency of humanity. Through her shows, books, and events, she has dedicated her life to activating the matrix for global ascension.
Hello and welcome to Lighten Up. I am your host, Suzanne Ross, and I am so excited to be back with Jim McCarty, who is the surviving member of the threesome who brought in the raw material for the Law of One series back in the early 1980s. And I'm just so grateful to you, Jim, for spending this time with us to help us learn more about the Law of One and the raw material. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, Suzanne, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
And this is part 2 of our interview series. And for this part, we are going to focus on the Law of One. We're also going to focus on how a group like Ra comes through for us in answer to humanity's call. And then we're going to talk about the harvest, what that means, and how we can prepare for that. So why don't we start by talking a little bit more about how your group attracted Group Ra, what they are, who they are, where they're coming from, and how they answer our call.
Okay, well, I guess the beginning was in 1962 when Don first conducted his experiment to see if he could reproduce what he'd heard about other groups having telepathic contact with supposed extraterrestrial beings. So out of that experiment was born the Louisville group, and they began receiving what was called the introductory type of information. Ra belongs to what's called the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator. And there are a number, I think at least 500 different planetary consciousness complexes like Ra that belong to that confederation. So in the beginning, we had communications from fourth density entities, Hetan and Latos. And then a little later on, when Carla learned to channel in 1974, which was about 12 years later, we began to get some intermediate information, or Don and Carla did. I wasn't with them yet. They got intermediate information from entities called Latwii and Oxal and a few others there. Over the years, a number of entities communicated. So they had gone through, I guess you would say, the process of becoming familiar with the philosophy of the Confederation, which described the nature of creation being a unity, that one creator made it all, that love was the power that made it all, and light was what it was all made out of. So if they were able to get a hold of this information and make sense of it in their own lives and put it to practice, then they would make themselves available to what some people would call advanced information or further information along that line. And that's what occurred when I joined them in 1980, at the end of 1980. 3 weeks later, on January 15th, 1981, Raw Contact started. And Raw mentioned in the very first session that they had information to offer that was, as they said, always and ever the same, although some people might consider it more advanced. It was speaking of the same creator, the same forces of love and light. And it was apparently the three of us deciding to get together kind of formed a critical mass that was necessary for those of Ra to be able to contact our group. And they said that the most important thing that helped them be able to contact us was the harmony that we had between us, the love we had for each other. And that was something that was very much a blessing. We didn't have to work for it. It was just there. It seemed like we had been old friends from eons ago, and we just come together again, which could be what happened, but it's what it felt like. And Ross said the other factor that helped them be able to speak through our group was Carla's great desire to serve the Creator, especially through communication and most especially through channeling. So those two factors, our harmony and her purity of seeking. And I guess you'd also have to say that about 19 years worth of experience with the introductory and intermediate information is what allowed those of Ra to speak through our group.
And I understand that groups like that are actually responding to a call. It's almost as if they hear us calling them. And they talk about sorrow. Can you expand on that, please?
Yes, they in fact describe themselves as the brothers and sisters of sorrow, because whenever there's a call from a planet like Earth, it usually comes in the form of sorrow, that entities on the planet really want to be able to grow spiritually, but there is some problem, that there's a difficulty there that those that are perhaps a little more advanced along the path and willing to lend a hand can actually help with. So Ra said that they were aware of this calling for thousands of years. You know, their experience with the Egyptians began 18,000 years ago when they were aware that the Egyptians were wanting to know about the Law of One, but they didn't land then. They did land 11,000 years ago, and that didn't go terribly well. They said that for every word they spoke, there were 30 misperceptions of the words. So they felt that there was some distortion that was being made into the Law of One that they felt responsible for. So they looked for other chances to speak and to aid the planet. And that apparently came about 3,500 years ago with the 18th dynasty of the Egyptians. Akhenaten was able to channel himself. He was in contact with Ra, and he was able to channel those messages. And for a while, he decreed the Law of One as the official religion of Egypt. But it was only for his lifetime. Once he had passed on into larger life, the priests and the people of that era quickly went back to the worship of many gods. So once again, Ra was left in the position of trying to figure out, well, how to answer this call on Earth for the Law of One. So for a great many years, thousands of years, they existed within the inner planes of planet Earth and were able only to make contact with individuals in usually the dream state, or it might be in meditative states when people would get an intuition or a hunch. They could be inspirational in that way to help people discover why they were here and to become teachers and students as well. And then when our group got together, they found the conditions they've been looking for a while to once again be able to make a telepathic contact and to speak the Law of One. So in general, they have been answering a call that have been issuing from planet Earth for thousands of years. The planet is apparently peopled by populations that have come from other third density planets who've gone through their graduation and their harvest. And not everybody has been able to make that harvest. They weren't able to be pure enough in their love and service of others, and they needed to repeat the cycle, and they've come to Earth to do that. So there's an especial call on Earth for the Law of One and for the other distortions, as Ross said, the Law of Love and the Law of Light, of love and wisdom. So this call has been issuing from Earth for thousands of years, and Ra was very happy, as were we in 1981, to be able to establish the contact.
You mentioned that they exist within the inner planes of Earth. Can you expand on that?
Well, the inner planes are what Ra called time space, or the metaphysical realm, the invisible realm. Uh, our third density is the only realm which does not have the clear seeing of everything that is going on. If we could remove that veil of forgetting between our conscious and subconscious minds, we would clearly see these entities around us. There is no shortage of experiences, of realities, of entities such as Ra that exist on the inner planes. The inner planes aren't necessarily so much inside the earth as they are invisible to us. They exist in a realm that is, you might say, the true realm. All entities that go from our earth through the death process go to what we might call the inner planes, or time space, or the metaphysical realms, the invisible realms. Those are all words to describe the same place. So when we leave this life and go back to our spiritual homes and review our incarnations and decide what we want to do for future incarnations in the way of learning and of serving, we go back to those inner planes where Ra is now. There are various levels to the inner planes, so that our first density, second, third, fourth, and fifth, all the way through the eighth density are represented there. Some of those planes are in potentiation. We, as right now third density beings, are not able to access them all, but those of Ra can access those through the sixth density. So the inner planes are, you might call the real life. That's where there is no illusion of separation. There's no possibility of separation. There is no disharmony. There's no possibility of disharmony. So it's here within the third density where all that exists as means by which we learn how to be harmonious and how to be unified and how to love each other.
That's so beautifully expressed. Thank you for that, Jim. Now, in your books, Ra answers to the condition that third density is transitioning into fourth density on our planet, and that it actually started 30 years ago, but there was an inconvenience about making that transition that had to do with the harmony on the planet. Can you talk to that more?
Well, that 30 years ago was 30 years previous to 1981. So it went back to 1945. The harvest has been going on for quite some time. And some of the inconvenience, well, World War II ended with the dropping of atomic bombs. And those are very destructive to the planet and to the entities that were within the blast radius of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Ra mentioned how it was necessary at that time for them to help to heal those entities, because the blast from the atomic bombs was so powerful they could disarrange the mind, body, spirit complex, so that it is possible that if no one entered to help them with their healing, that they would be disassembled. It would be a loss to the creator, part of the creator. So Ra was able to help the healing of those entities by calling upon the higher planes and bringing down the healing energies that would allow their mind, body, spirit complexes to remain unified. So there has been a great deal of disharmony on this planet for thousands of years. And this harvest has been going on, however, for a great deal of time. And they mentioned that the harvest would very likely occur somewhere around the year 2011, but that was an approximation. They said they have a difficult time trying to calibrate exactly in the time space, or the real nature of reality of where this is going to happen, because the people on our planet are so volatile in their choice making, in governments, in individuals, in various groups around the world. There is a lot of potential for more disharmony. So Ra said they could not tell exactly how things were going to turn out, but somewhere around this time we're living in right now would be the time during which not only would the planet be fourth density, which it is now. Our planet Earth is a fourth density planet now, but the population would have a chance to make that choice, to grasp the needle, as they said, and point it in one direction. As dissected and dissected and separate as we seem to be, there is still the possibility that we could all take the chance and the choice to point the needle in one direction and decide to seek in love and light the one creator that exists in all things. So this is something that we've heard through various other sources is occurring now, that the so-called portals of ascension are all over the planet, much like a grid network, and that the entities that are now going through the death process on our planet are being able to find their way to these portals, and that entities of the light realm are looking upon this as almost like a web of light being woven around the earth as these entities make it through the portals and then begin to lend their light and love to others that are remaining here on the earth who are potentially able to make that same choice when they go through the death process.
So let's talk more about exactly what you mean by harvest. And do beings actually have to go through the death process of dropping their body in order to make that shift into the fourth density?
No, that's the most usual way of doing it because it's available to everybody when they go through the death process. It's sort of like a default setting. If you haven't made it on your own individually beforehand, then you've got that to look forward to as, you know, one final chance. As you travel your spiritual path, there are all kinds of lessons that you can learn. And we always try to move our energies higher and higher up the energy centers. The entities in India have long known about the Kundalini. The Kundalini experience is a description of how the intelligent energy that comes through us every day from the sun begins at the red ray and goes then to the orange and the yellow. And if it's unblocked, it then can go to the green in the heart. That's the area of the availability for harvest. If we're able to love with a whole heart, at least 51% of the time in all our thoughts, our words, and our actions, then we make ourselves available for harvest as we go through the death process. But now, as we are still here on this earth as conscious seekers of truth, we can continue working to raise that energy of the Kundalini higher to the blue ray of the throat chakra, to communication and inspiration. And we can raise it higher into the indigo ray, where our very beingness as the creator resides. Ross says that each of us contains one creator. In fact, the creator is everywhere. And we have that creator within every portion of our body. But most specifically, if we can raise the energy in the chakras or the energy centers to the indigo ray, then we can make contact with the creator existing in the violet ray. So that this is the contact, Ross said, is also with what you might call intelligent infinity. That's a very neutral term that they use to describe the creator. It's the same thing, though. So we can, as conscious beings, while we're right here on planet Earth, through our meditation practice, through our learning how to love and be of service to others, through whatever our particular spiritual path has been, which we've chosen prior to the incarnation, we can make that ascension while we are here in the third density. And there are entities that are doing that. So there are two ways to do it. Consciously while you're here alive as a third density being, and as you go through the death process, when you walk the steps of light. And the light then begins to gauge your harvestability by examining your energy centers. You walk as far as you can. And if you make it through the fourth density, then there you are.
So when did Mother Earth make her transition into a fourth density planet?
Ross suggested that that transition was beginning about the time they made first contact with us in the early 80s, that it was continuing on, and by the time that the 2011 got here, they could successfully predict that the planet itself would be fourth density by then. What they could not predict was whether the population, the various individuals and social complexes here would be a fourth density or not, because it seems like there is a lot of positive energy all over the planet. But there's also a lot of energy that's confused. There's very little negative energy. As much negativity as it seems there is on the planet, there's very little negative harvest. There aren't enough entities of a negative nature really to consider. There is a lot of in-between where choices haven't been made. And we have a lot of confusion. So those areas of confusion are where we really need to focus our work and our energies so that this planet itself can become a fourth density planet with its population. Ross said that after the fourth density has been fully established, that this planet will be a positive fourth density planet. And that there are entities here now who have come from other third density planets and they have successfully gone through their graduation, and the Earth is going to be their new home, but they're here early to help us with our graduation, because it's a hard birth. It's a hard labor we're going through for Mother Earth to give birth to this new fourth density population.
So what does that graduation look like, Jim? It sounds like people, you know, on planet Earth, aside from the visitors who are coming in as fourth density, people on planet Earth who have graduated into the fourth density, what does that look like to graduate? And are you saying that they're living among us?
There are entities here now that have both the third density body, the yellow ray activated, as we all do, but they also have the fourth density body, the green ray activated too. But they also go through the forgetting process. So they have to remember why they're here. There's a challenge for them too, but they are here to help, and just their being here, as well as all these wanderers that are here from all over the galaxy, just their being here lightens the vibrations of the planet. They can also help by discovering that they are from elsewhere, that they have a mission here, and that they have specific things they can do with their being just the first thing. So they have various talents. Now, when people go through this graduation process, as they go through what we call the death process, they are immediately transferred from their, we have our yellow ray activated now. So our yellow ray body is what we have, this physical body. But when we go through the death process, we immediately go to our indigo ray body, the form maker body. And this is a body of light. And it's a very powerful body. It's, as we say, the form maker can make whatever form that we need in whatever density will be our final home. So each entity then goes to the form maker body, the indigo ray, and walks these stairs of light, or the steps of light. This light is provided by those entities that are of the octave. They are of the 8th density. And they come to provide this light as a means of helping our 3rd density graduation to gauge or measure the harvestability. And that's done by looking at the energy centers. This light then is able to examine the energy centers and see where there has been the lessons that have been learned in the red ray, in the orange ray, dealing with other selves one-to-one, in the yellow ray of dealing with other selves in groups, and then in the green ray of universal love for all beings everywhere and all things everywhere, because it is seen that it is the creator. Everything is the creator. So this light that comes from these, they're called guardians. It comes from the guardians, and this light is able to allow the entity that's just been in 3rd density, has gone through the death process, to walk these steps, and the entity walks it until the light becomes too glaring. When it becomes too glaring, that means the energy centers are no longer able to process any stronger light. So the entity steps aside. And where it steps aside is either the 3rd density or 4th density. And for most entities at this time, it's the 4th density. So that's the way the guardians provide the light. They're also, along the edges of this light, members of the Confederation who are in the wings, you might say, to be sure that each entity is able to progress as far as possible, that they do not stumble or halt before they reach their full potential. So if anybody stumbles or falls, then the Confederation sets them aright so they can continue into the light. And then there's a 3rd group of entities there, and Ross says these are what might be called angelic. They include our higher self, or maybe guides that we've had throughout our incarnations. They might include some members of our spiritual family, or other friends from the inner planes of Earth who have already made graduation and who have been attracted to a certain entity because of the way they were seeking and serving here in 3rd density. So there's a great number of entities that support this graduation process. So that it's not something you're just doing on your own. There's a great heavenly choir there, you might say, singing the hallelujahs as you're marching through the light.
That's beautiful. And something to look forward to.
Oh, indeed.
Yes, and so these people who are passing on out of their physical bodies and they're graduating into the 4th density, can they then come back to Earth at this time and reincarnate as a 4th density being here on the planet?
Well, that's something that would be hard to say, because as Roz said, it's hard to say how long the space-time is our illusion here, where space has the predominance over time. That's the time that Ross says is volatile. That depends upon the amount and types of choices that the various individuals and groups and nations make here. It is more likely that rather than coming back now, that these entities that have made the graduation would lend their light and services in other ways that might not be perceived by us visually, but they might be here to help us out in a way of inspiring us with hunches, with intuitions, with guidance, with helping us to cross paths with certain books or information or people, so that they can help us in this way. And in that way, they would be able to be of service and not have to incarnate when there might not be time for an incarnation. That is just something we don't know.
And would they have other options other than those related to planet Earth?
Entities of that nature who are able to go through the graduation can go on if they wish to. Ra said entities that are positively oriented seldom go on until their brothers and sisters can go with them. Entities of a negative nature, who are only in it for themselves, always go on. They use their ability to welcome and enjoy the light to progress on to some other fourth density negative planet, where they will fight for the ability to be at the top of the pyramid. But they'll probably have to start at the bottom and learn how to serve a master.
Now, what is it going to look like for us, Jim, when we make this shift from a third density social complex into a fourth density social memory complex? Have I got that terminology correct?
Right, yeah. Yeah, that was new terminology for us. I mean, Ra gave us so many concepts and words that were new to us, but what we have on the planet right now are social complexes, groups of people that relate to each other in a social fashion, and they do not have access to anything other than their conscious minds and their conscious memories and their conscious abilities. But when our planetary population is able to go through the harvest, then we will form what's called a social memory complex. If you look at the entire planet and its Akashic records, the records of every life and every experience and every life ever lived on planet Earth, it's a huge library of information. That is what will be available to every entity in the social memory complex. This huge library of information will then become, it's social memory. That's what it is. Everybody's memory will be available to everybody else. So that when they decide that they wish to be of service as a group, they'll have this great memory source to call upon to help them in their service.
Yes, that sounds, hang on one second. Your cat is so cute. It's just, it's kind of distracted me.
Chloe. Yeah. That's Chloe. That's the other cat.
Oh. Yes. Okay. I'll regather myself.
Thank you. I didn't know she was there.
That's so cute. Yeah. There's a little kitty cat in the screen. All right, my dear. So, okay. So many people have spoken about this shift taking place, and many people refer to it as an ascension. And some people say, it'll happen in the snap of a finger, the blink of an eye, and suddenly, this third dimensional reality will be something totally different. Can you speak to that?
Well, for the people that it happens to, that's exactly what will happen. But it's been happening for quite a while, so it's not something that happens for everybody in the blink of an eye. But for the person for whom it is happening, it does seem like it's the blink of an eye. Because one moment you're here thinking that you're going to be living your life as you have lived it up to this point, and then there's an opportunity presented to you that seems to be totally outside of the box, shall we say, something that you hadn't depended upon or hadn't thought about. Ross says that this moment of enlightenment is something that one cannot really predict, but it is available to everyone according to how they seek on their own journey of seeking, how they serve other people, how they're able to open their hearts and give love to everyone and everything, and be able to receive it as well. There needs to be balance in all of these things. So we can aid that process by the way we seek and the way we seek to serve others, the way we give our love, and the way we to see the creation around us.
So that sounds like an individual perception of a higher reality. What about the entire, population of the planet shifting into this fourth dimensional or fourth density state of being?
Well, that's something that's, for me, it's just subject to possibilities and conjecture. Because Ra has mentioned that it is possible in one fine, strong moment of inspiration for the entire population to choose a positive polarity. Now, how exactly that can come about and what it would be like, I really don't know. I mean, we see instances in the Bible where it's mentioned that one person will be working in the field and the other will be taken and so forth. I don't know if that's the way it's going to happen or not. But we do know that there is something of that nature that can happen. If you're familiar with an author by the name of Charles Eisenstein, and the book he's written, The More Beautiful World That Our Hearts Know Is Possible, he's talking about this very thing. He's talking about how the old story of the world, of being one of separation, of how science is going to elevate us and solve all our problems for us, is no longer working. It never did work. It only is obvious now that it's not working. We need a new story of the people, a story of interbeing, how everyone affects everyone else. Any act of kindness you give to any soul is felt throughout the planet. And all over the planet, there are these acts of kindness and of love and of realization and consciousness occurring. And that this new story is slowly coming to pass. So I think that there's something like that going on now, that if we keep our hearts open and our minds open and keep looking through the lens of love to the world around us, we can be more and more a part of that story and help it to happen. How exactly, when exactly it happened? Well, I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, but all I do know is if we keep moving in that direction, it can happen.
It sounds like if an individual 51% of the time acts and thinks and speaks from their heart, that they have the opportunity to make that shift. I wonder if the collective consciousness, if 51% of the collective consciousness were to think and act and speak from their heart, if that's what it would take to make a shift for our whole, consensus reality.
Well, it could very well be. Again, I don't know. There's this, in psychology, there's this theory called the 100th monkey effect, where enough entities, in this case it was monkeys, learned how to wash their food on islands that were separate in the Pacific. Then at some point, the monkeys on the other island, who had no physical contact with the monkeys on the island, knew how to do this washing of food. They learned it too. So there's something in all species that allows kind of like a species telepathy to consensus action. And I know that the human beings are part of that too. But for right now, it's just a great mystery. But we can begin solving it just by continuing to open our hearts and loving all of those around us.
Yes, that does seem like the best path. And let's talk more about that. So how can individuals that are seeking to ascend and, progress on their evolutionary journey, what are some of the ways that they can go about doing that?
Well, the way that Don asked, what is the best way to achieve harvest? And Ross said it was to seek the heart of being. And the heart of one's being, of course, is the Creator. So seeking the Creator and serving the Creator. And Ross suggested that each day that we go through our daily round of activities, we come face to face with the Creator wherever we are, because each person that we face there is the Creator. And each opportunity to be of service or to lend a hand or to simply give a smile or to do whatever is required at that moment, to be aware of what every moment is presenting you with opportunities to be of service, with opportunities to love, with the opportunities to be more than you've been before in that way. Then I think there's other ways that we can support that, when we're out in the world. When we're by ourselves and in our meditations, we can seek in the meditation to ask for assistance from our guides, from angelic forces, from the Creator, from whatever saint or being it has meaning for you, if it's Jesus or Buddha or Lao Tzu, whoever, to ask for assistance, to open up to it, because it's there. It's ready to work for you and with you and through you. So in our meditations, we can ask for this assistance. In our dream work, we can look for the dreams to give us special messages. We can ask our subconscious mind to help us with our dreams so that we can see more things that are available to us. Dreams can be a very powerful way of getting to the subconscious mind and the information there. We can begin keeping journals that we write about our spiritual journey, what it has provided us so far as ways of being of service to others. How we can do more in that regard. By keeping a journal, we're sort of offering the opportunity to both our conscious and subconscious minds to do what you might call automatic writing, to begin coming through with information from a deeper level of our subconscious mind, or maybe even from other entities that are our guides, that we can open ourselves to such a degree that these types of communication can occur. So I would say that it's basically being able and willing to seek the Creator with everything you do, with every fiber of your being, each moment of each day, because there is nothing but the Creator around you. Ross said each moment contains love. That is the great mystery and challenge of this third density, to find the love in the moment. And if you can't find the love in the moment, maybe you need to put your love in the moment. So basically, we need to keep looking through the lens of love at everything around us, and finding the Creator there, and giving praise and thanksgiving for the Creator that we find, wherever we find the Creator.
So beautiful, Jim. Thank you for that. You're so inspiring and empowering. And speaking of that, I have to share with the audience what a positive impact the Law of One series had on my life. And, how fascinated I was by the first book, The Raw Material, and the pictures of you three, pulling in through the information of Raw. And I first started reading them in about 2008 or 9. And I understand it's much easier at this time to pull through channeled information than it was then. And I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I figured if, beings could be channeled by other people, why couldn't I do that, myself? And so I was inspired to put pen to paper and see if I could maybe do some automatic writing. And the first thing that came through for me as I put pen to paper in little tiny squiggly lines was written out raw.
Yeah, really.
Yes. And then love, and then unity, and then body, mind, and spirit, and integrate.
Oh.
And it came across on 6 different pieces of 8.5 by 11 paper. And I actually shared that with Carla a few years ago when I had that opportunity to interview her. And she was very interested to see, what that automatic writing looked like. So I scanned it and emailed it to her, and because she just thought that would be fun to see that automatic writing came through. And then I decided that was very laborious because it was just little tiny squiggles, that would on one piece of paper come up with one word, and I thought, well, that's not a very effective way to get a lot of information. And so I was guided to use voice recognition software. In fact, I was hearing in my meditations as I attempted to contact a group Raw and communicate with them, that I was hearing this word dragon coming through. And what they were trying to convey to me was this dragon naturally speaking voice recognition software.
Right.
So I could have my computer on and open, and I could then pull information through speaking aloud, and the computer would type it for me.
Yeah.
Mind you, I had to go back and, try to make sense of it. But I didn't have an individual that, would sit and, take notes for me. And I figured if I, recorded it, that would be awful laborious to try to go back and then type what I had recorded. So that made so much sense. And I was able to ask profound questions. I was very interested about the true nature of reality and the subatomic world of energy and quantum physics. And I was able to ask some pretty complex questions about, what are the purpose of gravity waves, for instance? And, this information would just come through, for, maybe 30 minutes, and it would answer, all of the questions that I had in my mind. And I was able to pull through and create a book called Rise Up.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a 500-page book. I haven't published it yet, but it contained a lot of information I was able to bring through by channeling.
That's pretty amazing. That's beautiful.
Yes, well, and I wanted to let you know that, your books were the inspiration for that. Being able to have that confidence that, maybe I could myself channel and have some of my own, questions answered, and then share them, because in the book, you guys really emphasize teach, learn, and learn, teach. And that which you learn, if you teach it to others, you're really serving a higher purpose.
Right.
And serving. I really feel called, to serve others and, to teach some of these more advanced concepts about who we are and why we're here and what we're here to do and where we're going. All inspired by, your books, really. And I find that the channeled information, is really this higher perspective that can really benefit us and help us progress on our evolutionary journey.
It is indeed. Did you get any idea of who might be contacting you? Do you think might have been a guide of yours, or do you know?
Well, as you know, when I first tried my hand at channeling, Ra came through, but then later, Ascended Master Saint Germain
Oh,
made
yeah.
himself very clear that he was present. And I was called, I feel like I'm drawn to particular books, that suddenly appear for me. Whether I'm at a library and they seem to just push themselves out at me, or
Right.
someone comes and says, you have to read this book. So Unveiled Mysteries by Godfrey Ray King, became, present to me. And some people that I was meditating with, kept saying, you have to read these books by Godfrey Ray King and the Unveiled Mysteries, and then the whole I Am Chronicles by Saint Germain. And so I did. And during that time, then when I would go into meditation with the intention of bringing through some higher intelligence, Saint Germain made himself very present to me
Right.
and wanted to come through and communicate. And so then I was able to channel him and bring through some teachings that he wanted to bring through. And so Saint Germain. And then more recently, with the Divine Feminine, Sophia made herself very clear that, she wanted to come through for me with some knowledge and to share in circles. Like we are now, coming together in councils of light
Right.
here in the Sedona community. And that was inspired by Sophia, bringing some goddesses together, but, men too, bringing in the feminine energy. So,
Well, men have feminine energy in them too. So that's what really needs to be developed these days, the feminine energy, whether it's in males or females. We need more of the feminine energy.
yes, absolutely. So thank you for letting me share that with.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm very impressed.
Oh, thank you. And so speaking of more material, I just love Carla's book, The Wanderers, and it too has been a really valuable part of my journey. So I know recently you have translated those books into audio. Is that correct?
Right. I have a little recording studio in the basement made out of a very small bedroom, and we put blankets up around there to make the sound blunted. And I've been able to record all of the books that Carla either wrote or channeled. And eventually they will be available as audio books, but they're going to have to be edited first. Have to be sure that I didn't make mistakes here and there, because it's easy to make mistakes. Usually I could catch myself when I made a mistake, and I would immediately record the correct reading, so that it would be easy for an editor to go through and just to paste that over.
Right.
A process that I don't understand, but I've really enjoyed doing that because, Carl and Don and I were always a team, and this kind of gives me a feeling of being a team again.
Aw,
Working with them and getting those energies. And I'm pretty sure they're helping me out.
oh, I'm sure of it. So I would love to encourage our audience, because, this show does go out to because this show does go out to those seeking truth and those who are spiritually inspired. And so I would imagine a large percent of them are wanderers. And I highly recommend that they go to your LL Research site and go to your library and order the Wanderer's Handbook. Can you talk more about what the content is in the Wanderer's Handbook?
Well, back in the early 90s, we really got into computers and being able to communicate with people via email. And Carla would get a lot of emails from readers of the Law of One books, and they would say, I don't have anybody to talk to about my spiritual journey. There's nobody in my family's interested, none of my friends are interested. So there were a lot of folks that were isolated around the country, around the world. And they would ask Carla questions. They'd say, how do I pursue my journey in a situation like this, and so forth. So she discovered there were probably about 100 questions that were asked over and over and over. She decided she would categorize those questions, and that she would write a book that would address those questions. So that's how the Wanderer's Handbook came into existence. All the various questions that can come up for a spiritual seeker, I think pretty much came up. She probably had over 100 to 150 different people that allowed her to use their questions, and she gave them credit in the book for the questions and so forth. And then people who have those questions in the future could then sit down and kind of look up the table of contents and find that other people had the same questions years ago, and here's what they did about it. Here's what Carla had to say about it. And so it is really a handbook for, she has as a wanderer's handbook, but really it's the spiritual seeker's handbook, because when you become a spiritual seeker consciously, you're basically in the same position as a wanderer from elsewhere. You're living a life that's a little unusual as compared to most people's lives here on planet Earth. So you need a little extra, I guess, understanding or encouragement, some guidance along the way, some inspiration, some companionship. And that's what she really sought to provide with the Wanderer's Handbook. And it's been a very a good seller over the years, but it's also, like all of our material, it's also available for a free download from our website. So if you like to read downloads, they're there for free. A lot of people like to have something in their hands that they can hold. So we also have the books available.
Yes, and I highly recommend that people offer a donation too, for, you know, all the hard work and effort that you all have put into all of this wonderful material over the years. And that Wanderer's Handbook, just to go back to that for a moment, I have to tell you how closely I held that to my heart, because like other wanderers, and just like you said, those on planet Earth who are seeking, you know, you oftentimes feel so alone. You know, you're really experiencing a higher dimensional understanding of, you know, love and light, and you have such a strong desire to serve, and you just start seeing things from this higher perspective that many of those around you, you know, don't understand. And so, you know, I've heard the word woo-woo way too many times. And, you know, I've finally just come to accept it as a term of endearment. But I definitely have gone through times where I've, you know, kind of resented being labeled that, because, you know, those people that I know who are spiritual seekers are highly intellectual, very intelligent, very thorough in their research. And it's not like you're just accepting things at, you know, face value. People are diving in and doing all kinds of research and seeking and, you know, deep meditation. And so, yeah, it just really made me feel like I was involved with a community that was vast, and I wasn't alone, you know, out there in this 3D world being made fun of. Yes. And then Aaron Quo Dialogues. Wow, that is a phenomenal work. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, yeah. It's unique in that two spiritual entities of discarnate nature speaking to each other and getting along quite well. Barbara Brodsky was a woman who lost her hearing during childbirth somewhere in the early 80s. And toward the end of the 80s, she became aware of a voice speaking inside of her. And it was Aaron. Aaron was her guide. And apparently Aaron and she were incarnated together about 500 years ago in the area around India. And that she had stepped in front of a spear that was meant for Aaron. So she gave her life for Aaron. Aaron then decided that after he made his liberation, he was able to be graduated consciously, that he would become a guide for Barbara. And he was of the Buddhist variety. So that's a type of aspect of knowledge and wisdom that Aaron has to share. And when Barbara became aware of this voice sharing this knowledge inside of her, she began writing it down. And she was very impressed by it because it made sense. It was internally consistent. It was very inspiring. But she was wondering about it. She, you know, she wasn't into channeling or the spiritual path beforehand. This all just happened to her, and it was a surprise. So she came in contact with the raw material and decided she would write Carla and ask Carla to give her opinion on this material that she was getting from Aaron. So Carla was very impressed with the material. She'd seen a lot of work over the years that wasn't quite this quality. So she got back in touch with Barbara and said, yes, you've got a good contact here. Let's keep talking, because there's a way of making it even better to be able to receive this information more clearly. So over the years, Carla and Barbara became very good friends, and Barbara was eventually able to open up her Deep Spring Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and offer these teachings from Aaron to a great number of people in that area. and offer workshops and lectures and so forth, and healings. And eventually, Carla and Barbara decided that they would join forces and just come together over a series of weekends. I believe we got together on 9 different weekends, Friday through Sunday. Most of them were here in Louisville, but we'd go up to Ann Arbor a couple of times. And what we would do is the people who would gather around from Barbara's group and from our group would have questions. And so they would ask these questions of Aaron and Quo. And depending upon the answers, then there would be more questions. So it kind of fed itself. It kept going because people had more questions. So we began recording all of it, and eventually it ended up into the Aaron Quo dialogues. So Aaron and Quo are each given a chance to respond to each of the questions that came from the people in these groups. And it's been a very interesting book, and it hasn't sold a whole lot of books, but we've been so blessed to have it. One of the things that drove Carla to try this experiment was that back in the 80s, and I don't know if it's still the case right now, but a lot of channels would sort of be competitive with each other. Well, my channel's different or better than yours and so forth. And the ego seemed to be getting in the way in some cases. So Carla wanted to show that it was possible to set the ego aside and to be able to channel your source, whatever it was, and that the sources themselves had no problem at all with any kind of ego. They were happy to communicate to anybody who was wanting to listen. So they were, Aaron and Quo got along great. They each made each other laugh and elaborated on what the other person had to say. And it was just a trading back and forth of energy and information and inspiration. And we were so pleased and privileged to be able to do that work.
Well, that's another book that I highly recommend. It's kind of a hefty book, but
It
it is so inspiring, and the expressions are just so beautiful. It's just all about, radiating love and light, but it also addresses, those shadows that, we really need to deal with and grapple with in this 3D reality of comparatives, and, really helps the individual work through that and move through those, obstacles on their path, and helps the individual also understand themselves to a much deeper degree, I think. I thought the book was very helpful in many regards, so I highly recommend that as well.
Well, thank you. That was our hope.
Yes, yes. And now you have a new book, Tilting the Windmill, and I was able to download that as a PDF. Yes. So you tell us more about that book and how that came about?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, back in July of 2014, Gary got Carl and I together for a week. And we were here in the room, and Carla was in her hospital bed, and I sat beside her. And Gary asked us 400 questions. It took 30 hours, and the questions were everything to do with biographies of Don, of Carla, and me. Went into the raw contact in great depth, into the information we got there, into other entities and sources we channeled through LL Research since 1962, and through everything that is at all related to LL Research. It's really an archive work for anybody interested in LL Research. And Gary did such a magnificent job. Gary Bean is our director of LL Research, and he was assisted by Austin Bridges, who's the assistant director. And they were able to put all that information together and publish it here in-house. They were able to format the book and to get all the pictures in there and the various charts and graphs and describe the information in certain areas that they were getting. And it's just a really fine work. I think it's something that the people who are interested in the history of LL Research would enjoy. And also he has some information about where we're going in the future. So it was a work that was really the inspiration of Gary Bean, our director. And Carl and I were just thrilled to be able to recall the good old days during the raw contact and when Don was with us. And it was a real a pleasure and privilege to be a part of that. And like I said, it took a full week, 30 hours of interviews in order to get all the information down, recorded.
So I downloaded that as a PDF, but it's also available as a book?
Yes, it is. It's available from our online store.
And so can you tell us about some of the other books? I know there was like a channeling guide book. And some other books. Can you expand on some of the other books that are available through your library?
Well, a channeling handbook was written in 1988 by Carla. because she had seen a number of workshops that were weekend workshops where people could learn how to channel, and then they were off on their own. And she thought that was a little too soon to be off on your own, that you need to have a guide with you, a more experienced channel to work with you for quite a while after you're a channel. So she put together the channeling handbook as a means to provide that kind of information to people who were already channeling and who needed to get a little bit more information about how to do it and how to do it well and responsibly, because it's a large universe and there's lots of kinds of entities out there, and you need to be able to discriminate as to what entities you've got. So basic two features of the channeling handbook that Carla had to contribute was number one, and this is one that a lot of people already know, is to tune yourself as an instrument. Take some time before you channel, every time before you channel, to meditate, to pray, to ask that the highest information that you can hold in a stable manner come through you. And then the other thing that some people don't know about is you need to be able to challenge any entity willing to speak through you in the name of whatever quality or person or whatever is the heart of your spiritual journey. That is who you really are spiritually and metaphysically. For Carla, it was Jesus, because she had experiences with Jesus from the age of 2 years old that told her what unconditional love was. So Jesus was the entity in whom she would challenge any entity wishing to speak through her. They would have to be able to say that Jesus is Lord. So that pretty much eliminates a lot of sources of a negative nature who cannot stand that type of a challenge, because when you challenge in the name of whatever is the heart of your spiritual journey, Christ consciousness, the Buddha, Lao Tzu, service to others, whatever it might be, that is who you are, and that quality stands with you in the metaphysical realms. So any entity wishing to channel through you must be able to answer those challenges. And Ra always mentioned that the Confederation, the planets in the service of the infinite creator, appreciated such challenges because they knew that there was a crowded universe and you want to be sure you know who you've got. So they appreciated being challenged. And they could say, yes, indeed, we come in the name of love. Yes, we come in the name of Christ consciousness. So that was no problem for them. So that's where a channeling handbook came from. And then she wrote a book in 2005 to try to help people understand the raw material and the law of one, because there's a lot of interesting and somewhat difficult concepts that are expressed in there. So she tried to write a book that would make those concepts more easily understood. And that was called Living the Law of One, 101, The Choice. So that book is 12 chapters long, and it goes through the various energy centers and various densities and describes the basic information the Ra gives. And Carla uses quotes from the raw material, but she puts it in her words and is able to make it a little easier to understand. So that was really the reason that book was written. I need to take a break and get a drink.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so speaking of living the law of one, I have to share with you, my sister came to visit and she asked if she could borrow the book.
Yeah.
And she still hasn't given it back to me. Last time I saw her, I said, "Can I have my book back?" And she goes, "Oh no, I love this book. I'm not giving it back until I've read every word."
Yeah, it's actually our best-selling book because.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, people appreciate the information being put in a way that they can grasp it a little more easily.
Yes, I'm just so pleased I can share it and that she's getting so much out of it. So thank you.
Yeah. And going way back to the very first book that Don and Carla wrote together was called The Crucifixion of Esmeralda Sweetwater.
Yes.
And that book was very interesting in that it, well, the way it was written and the fact that it wasn't fiction like they thought it was. It actually was prophetic. It had a number of things for LL researchers that came true in the future, about a dozen or so. But the way they wrote it, they would sit together on the couch. Carla would lie down and put her head in Don's lap. Don would have a tape recorder in his hand. And they saw the book much as you would see a movie. They saw it in their minds. Don would see the plot, and Carla would see the characters. And that was how the book was written. So the only thing they couldn't see clearly, as they saw everything else, was the ending of the book. The book, of course, by the title, someone has to die. The characters in there, each of the three of us were mentioned in there. They had me in there, even though they hadn't met me yet. But they perfectly described my face by describing what Timothy Bear looked like. So there are two other characters. One was Carla, that's Esmeralda, and one was Don, and that was Joshua Starr. So they knew that somebody had to die. They figured, well, you know, Don's so healthy, he's never had a sick day in his life, and Carla had all these issues, medical issues. It probably was going to be Carla. So they wrote it that way, and that was the way that they finally decided. But it turned out that Don was the one to go first. So that was 1984. Then the second book that they wrote together was 1976. They wrote Secrets of the UFO. And basically that was a compilation of Don's previous 25 years of investigation into the UFO phenomenon. And it wasn't just investigating hard cases, you know, abductions and face-to-face contacts and so forth. I mean, that's in there. But they also got into the channel information and how that played into the overall expressing of the philosophy of those entities that are in the UFOs. So that was a very interesting book. And in that book, they also write about wanderers. In chapter 8 is all about wanderers. And that was one of the first places that anybody had seen information on this quality of wanderers, beings from higher densities that would come back to Earth and willingly go through the forgetting to be part of Earth so they could help Earth in its graduation and be able to remember why they were here and offer certain services, teaching or healing or anything like that. So that was Secrets of the UFO. And that is still in print as well. And it still, to this day, is a very good book to describe the UFO phenomenon because it describes it not only from the hard cases, but from the philosophical point of view of why they're here. And because there is a harvest going on, there are a great many sources of extraterrestrial information available on the planet. And as you said, many more people are contacting those sources and able to express them and to share that information to help with the graduation.
Yes, and I read for the first time in Tilting the Windmill that Don actually became very fascinated by a case that occurred when he was only 9 years old. A UFO sighting that took place nearby when he was just 9.
Well, the sighting that really affected him the most is when he was 17. There's a sighting of our vice president of LR Research was 8 years old when he sighted a UFO, and he met Don because so that's where the kid comes in. Morris was living in southern Louisville in Jefferson County, and he and 3 of his friends were out one summer's day in a field playing, and a UFO landed in front of them. And so being kids, they took dirt clods and threw them at the UFO. And this little entity about 3 feet tall got out and had this little rod that he pointed at them and sort of gave them electric shock and suggested them not throw any more clods. Well, a voice came to Morris in his mind, and it said, go to another place. And so Morris went there because Morris couldn't see the first UFO, but he got a message from the entities inside to go to another place. And there he received an inspiration to discover not only the meaning of the UFO, but the meaning of his life and what he was supposed to do with his life. So his mother was very psychically oriented as well. And when she heard that this UFO case happened to her son, she contacted the University of Louisville to see if there's anybody there who might be investigating UFOs. And just so happened that Don Elkins had been investigating them, and he was a professor of physics there. So that's how Morris and Don met many, many years ago. And of course, Morris is still our vice president and still very active with LL Research. But the case that really affected Don himself was when he was 17. And he was taking flying lessons at the flying school here, the Elkins Mantell Flying School. A distant relative of his was the Elkins part. And Captain Tom Mantell of the Kentucky Air National Guard was the Mantell part. And he was only 25 years old, but he was a captain in the Kentucky Air National Guard, and he was teaching Don how to fly. Well, one day he was flying a P-51, a World War II fighter plane, along with 3 other pilots, each flying a P-51. They were flying from Marietta, Georgia, to Louisville Standerford Field. And that morning, there had been 30 different calls to the Kentucky Highway Patrol by civilians mentioning a large unidentified flying object just south of Mayfield, Kentucky. So eventually, the Kentucky Highway Patrol called Godman Field, Fort Knox, and said, do you have any planes in the air that can investigate this UFO? So Godman Field radioed Captain Mantell and asked if he could plot an intercept course and try to discover what this unidentified flying object was. So after about half an hour, Captain Mantell radioed Godwin Field that he had the UFO in sight, that it was huge. It was 300 feet in diameter. It was round. It was metallic. It was shaped like an upside-down ice cream cone with a point on top and the rest. So he got close enough to see inside. He said, "My God, there are people in there. There are people inside that UFO." Right at that moment, the UFO shot straight up at a rapid rate of speed, and Captain Mantell gave chase. Well, unfortunately, he did not have oxygen in his plane. And when he passed through 20,000 feet, he passed out due to lack of oxygen. So his plane augured in and crashed, and he was killed. He was killed on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. So that crash did two things. It got the American public thinking, well, UFOs might be real, because up to that point, the few sightings that had been made were all poo-pooed as, well, that's swamp gas, or that's a weather balloon, or something like that. But now, for the first time ever, a member of the United States military had been killed chasing a UFO. And the second thing it did was get Don Elkins interested in investigating UFOs. So that's how he got interested in the field.
Thanks for expanding on that. And I was searching my memory about why I was hung up on this 9-year-old Don Elkins. And I think it was this interesting idea that he had where he wouldn't get out of the car and go into church with
That's
his
true.
parents.
Yeah.
And that's, that's pretty deep for a 9-year-old to already start contemplating the philosophical meaning of religion.
Yes, Don was a very interesting fellow. He had deep thoughts at a very early age. His mom and dad were both Christian scientists. So that meant that they both went to the church on Sunday, and his mom was a practitioner, so she would give what amounted to a service and a sermon. And Don finally made a deal with him that he would go to church, but he wouldn't get out of the car. So he was 9 years old when he made that choice. He kept asking the big questions all the way through grade school and high school. How big is the universe? How does it work? Is there an end to it? So he asked those questions. That he was always concerned with the biggest possible questions. And that's really what got him interested in UFOs and being able to ask those questions of Ra. I mean, if you read the questions of the Ra contact, you see how intelligent those are.
Yes.
His combination of intelligence, intuition, and experience was just incredible.
And Carla's willingness to serve the Creator, and your profound ability to hold the energy and run energy through her chakras while she channeled. And, just the three of you and your harmonious relationship and love for one another, the whole thing is just so incredibly beautiful. And what you guys were able to bring through, with the Raw material and all of the other books has been such a great service to humanity, Jim.
Well, thank you so much. It's what we wanted to do. It just didn't, there was no question in our minds that we wanted to be together and to do this work. It was like we had realized our pre-incarnative choices very clearly.
And your library is just such a gem of, amazing books that I so encourage our audience, to go and check out. And you guys are just so generous for, offering them as PDFs, and soon, there'll all be audio downloads as well. And just such a great service. You really are in service to others in this lifetime, Jim.
Thank you. That was always Don's dream. Back before the computers, he said to Carla, I want to be able to make all of this information available worldwide for free. And the internet has allowed us to do that.
Yes, and thank you so very much for that beautiful website. And I also want to, reach out and thank Austin Bridges. I know that he works really hard for you guys, and, he helps to create those websites. And I've emailed him over the years, and he's just always so friendly and helpful.
Oh, he is indeed. I've got a great crew in there with Gary and Austin. I couldn't have better people.
Yes, I hope to come someday. I would love to visit LL Research there in Louisville.
Oh, you'd be most welcome. I hope you do come.
Thank you. And I would also love to be able to organize an event here in Sedona. I know that, our spiritual community here would be so incredibly fascinated by everything that you're sharing, with me, like in this interview, but also, the many books that you guys have to offer. And, we'll have to talk more about that offline.
I'll be glad to talk. I'm glad to come and glad to talk.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all of your time. This interview and the one we did prior are so jam-packed with incredible information, so inspirational, and so much enlightenment that you have to share. I so appreciate it, Jim.
It's been a great honor for me. This is what I live to do, is be able to share the information that we gathered and to try to play some part in people's growth.
It's truly an honor and a privilege. Thank you so very much. And I do want to dedicate this interview to, our beloved Carla. It was such an honor to be able to interview her a few years ago, and we'll maybe make that available by audio. And also, of course, dedicated to Don Elkins and his lifelong dedication to bringing this information forward.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate that very much.
What a delightful man Jim McCarty is, and so very prolific about the raw material. I did have the opportunity to interview Carla Rueckert in May of 2010. She passed in 2015, and it was such an honor and privilege to be able to interview her before she passed. The information that she shared was so heart-centered. I just love her beautiful energy, and it made me open my heart. I began the interview with Carla by pouring my heart out to her. And so as I share this interview with you, please keep in mind that the first part of it is me really opening up to Carla about how the work of the three of them, the raw material that they brought forward, was so incredibly significant for me in my life and allowed me to make a transformational shift in consciousness, and why I was so inspired to reach out to them for these interviews. Also, please excuse the audio. This was done on Skype almost 10 years ago, and I used a recording app at the time. So you can understand what we're saying, but it's not the high quality audio that I usually like to offer the listeners. So just sit back and enjoy this very heart-centered interview with the late Carla Rueckert. So this morning I decided to meditate prior to this interview, and it occurred to me that the most conducive method would just be to open my heart and mind and share with you the experiences that have led me to this place on my evolutionary journey, and not allow the distractions of my ego's need to control and have a formal structure. So, I'm just going to open up and tell you, why I decided to write a book. I don't know if Austin was able to share with you some of the things that I had forwarded to him. I forwarded some excerpts from my book, as well as some of the automatic writing that I have done with Ra.
No, he hasn't. So tell me about it.
So, first of all, I started on a path about 5 years ago, following a very difficult period in my life where I was confronted with some intense suffering and sort of a dark night of the soul. And as a result of that, I had a profound awakening, which resulted in just an intense desire to try and uncover the meaning and purpose of life. And I, desperately was seeking spirituality. And all of that started to unfold immediately in a series of synchronistic events that, have just been remarkable. It started out with Buddhism, because that's what my sister was involved with. And so I began reading books by Robert Thurman, The Jewel Tree of Tibet, and then she's involved with Western Kadampa Buddhism, and I went to some retreats with her. And I found that, to be incredibly beautiful. However, my heart felt open to explore every type of spiritual path, including Christianity and Hinduism. And then in deep meditation, I began to feel that I was truly connecting with a higher source of intelligence that started to flow through me. And I just started writing. And sometimes I would write, and I would look back and read it and think, who the heck wrote this?
Yes.
I read in your book, The Personal Material, that you consider yourself a spiritual listener. And I wanted to embrace that opportunity in this interview. And of course, the information that you provide through Ra about wanderers, so I have asked in some of my channelings, if I am a wanderer, and I use a crystal pendulum and a yes-no board, and I get a very strong yes. And so I tried my hand at automatic writing. I had a desire to increase my psychic sensitivity, and so I read in a book that, you could go into a deep meditation and just put pencil to paper and see what happens.
Absolutely.
So I just put the pen to paper and let it flow, and I started writing these little tiny spiral squigglies, and I forwarded that to Austin, so you'll have an opportunity to see what came out of that.
Okay.
But it says Ra and then hello.
I'm making a note about that.
So I wrote out Ra, and below that, hello. And the next page said integrate. And the next page said mind, body, soul. And the next page said love, followed by yes. And that was the end of that communication. And I have not since attempted the automatic writing. It felt important to me to verify that the contact was Ra, because I felt that it was, but that helped to verify it for me. And then I didn't feel like the automatic writing in that way was necessary any longer. And then,
Did you notice that Ra's description of a person is a mind, body, spirit complex?
Yes, I have read all.
That's probably confirmation enough right there.
Yes.
And the Ra group created a special language that is unique to those of Ra. I've never seen another philosopher use those particular terms, and I think they're very helpful.
Yeah.
The way he described them.
Absolutely. They resonate deeply for me. And your first book, it seems as if Hatton was one of the first contacts from the Confederation. Is that correct?
When I was learning in 1974, Hatton was my first contact and my favorite contact for a long time.
What you write in the first book about his, information, his channeling is remarkable. And I have written that down and referred back to it throughout the course of my, path, my growth, because what he has to say is just so profound and beautiful, so full of love and light. It's just incredibly inspiring.
I am so glad you find the material useful. It just makes my heart soar.
Oh, that's wonderful. So after I began just, in deep meditation, followed by, writing, I developed a program called a 28-day path to self-realization. And that was a live program that I taught at a wellness center. And that led to writing my book, Lighten Up, a 28-day evolution of consciousness. And I called the book Lighten Up because I had a fitness center for 15 years called Lighten Up. Um,
Oh,
which is also indicative. This was, 20 years ago. I had been living on the East Coast and I had an incredibly stressful job in the corporate world. And I'm a Southern California girl, so I felt very displaced on the East Coast, and I was having anxiety attacks and a series of physical illnesses, from eczema to my hair falling out. And, I was just a wreck.
ah,
So I moved to the desert. Well, I just visited my sister who was staying in the desert of Southern California. And as soon as I got there, I felt like I had come home. And I was just having a wonderful time with my family and friends, and the bright sunlight and the warm temperatures was such a break from the harsh winters of the East Coast. And I
yes.
just woke up one day and realized that I would have to return to what felt to me like purgatory if I were to go back. And I woke up and I just started running toward this mountain that I had been hiking, and I ran straight up to the top of the mountain and I threw my arms up and I just said, please help me. I need some answers. I feel like I'm in a situation where there's just no way out. I realize I'm terribly unhappy. And suddenly I just dropped my shoulders and I heard a voice say, can't you see you have come home? You're,
Ah,
you're going to stay here and you're going to heal yourself and you're going to heal many others. Don't worry about the details. You will be guided every step of the way. And I just felt embraced by love, and I felt this incredible sense of inner peace and joy. And I turned around and walked down the mountain, and I never looked back, and I stayed in the desert, and I opened a wellness center, and I had that business for 15 years called Lighten Up, and helped hundreds of people heal. And of course I healed myself.
that's wonderful. Yes. That's terrific. Good for
I
you.
call that my divine intervention.
I do too.
So now I'm just gonna
That is incredible.
be quiet and let you and absorb your wisdom and insight on my evolutionary path, because I feel as a wanderer, the readers of my book who feel, who they also feel are wanderers would benefit from that.
Yes. Have you read Wanderer's
I
Handbook yet?
haven't.
Oh, you might like
Yeah.
that. Around the turn of the century, I took the 15 or so years since email began. I'd been on the web, and people had been writing me emails, which I had saved, asking me questions. And I got the questions over and over, and I started thinking I should write a book of responses to these questions, because then I could just refer people to the book when they asked me, and I wouldn't have to repeat again, iterate, reiterate, reiterate. So I went through all my email very carefully, and I analyzed every question, and it boiled down to 105 questions, 107, something like that repeated over and over. And so then I organized them. I'm a researcher, I'm a librarian. I organized them, and I created the book from those topics. And I organized the book so that every topic was an essay that you could read by itself, but it also blended into the others in a flow, so you could read the thing as a book, cover to cover, and it wouldn't jar you,
Right.
It flowed. And it's called A Wanderer's Handbook. And my idea was to create a user's manual for the human being.
I like that. We need one, Carla. We need one. This density experience.
And I think that a lot of us are wanderers, but more than that, I think that all of it, once we wake up, we become wanderers. We can't go back to sleep. We can't go back. We've got to move forward. We've got to seek. So I figured this book was basically for everybody, but it's mostly for wanderers. And the majority of the people that respond to the Law of One are wanderers.
I was actually introduced to your series of books by David Wilcock's book, The Source Field. Yeah.
Yeah, David has probably sent more people to us than anybody else on the planet. He's always talking about the Law of One, and everything that he writes has got the Law of One in it. And usually if I say, well, where did you find out about us? 2 times out of 3 it'll be from David's site.
Oh, no kidding.
Or from one of his books, or from Edgar Cayce, the book on him being Edgar Cayce.
Yeah, that book would too, right?
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating to me how, you know, all of these people, Edgar Cayce, David Wilcock, yourself, you know, just have unfolded. I feel as if every book that comes into my presence is divinely guided. And I was a member of the Edgar Cayce, you know, association when then yes, yeah. Association for Research and Enlightenment.
It's a very good organization.
Yeah. And then I was on a nature walk, which to me is more like a walking meditation, you know, because out in nature I feel so open to the universal energy and just am always in such awe and wonder of the creation. And I was looking in my phone for another book to download, and David Wilcock's book just popped up right on my screen. And I thought, okay, The Source Field. And what an incredible book. And one thing that really attracted me to it was the bridge between science and spirituality. You know, I had a sense that everything is one. Science, spirituality, religion, you name it, it's all one. And that book, you know, really brought that message home for me.
Yes. Well, I think that is so true. When you finally put things down to, well, you know, what do you know about this? Let's look at this. How much do you know about this really? You discover that science sounds like we have it all figured out. Funny, I was just reading that this morning. I wrote this, the introduction to the first volume of the Law of One in 83, something like that. And it's as true today as it was then. And I was writing that, you know, when you start to think about science, you think, well, they have it all figured out. But then you discover that the sources, like what's electricity, what makes things attracted to each other, what's the basis of physics and so forth, you discover that they can work with the data. They can connect the data. They can connect the dots to use it. And you don't know why it works. Science does not know what causes particles to attract. They don't know what makes a magnetic field. They don't know what light is. They don't know what gravity is. They can use them, but they don't know what they are. So when you come down to the first thing, they're mysteries. Whether you want to say that that's mysteries of the spirit or mysteries of science doesn't matter. They're mysteries of consciousness. And that's both science and religion, and neither. You know, it goes far back beyond what we name things. And looks at, I mean, that's the beauty of the Law of One, is that it penetrates all of the facade and takes us back to the very first things. That was what I was saying to you yesterday. It takes us back to what is the kingpin on which everything turns. Well, you wouldn't think it would be free will, but it is. My free will to talk to you and your free will to listen, or vice versa, and the Creator's free will to decide to know more about who it is, who am I? That original curiosity. We have a curious Creator.
And as such,
whose name is love.
Whose name is love,
You know?
right? And as such, she's got creative and curious children, right?
Yes, because that's who we are. We're all little bits of the Creator, and we're out here gathering information in the field, and we're gonna eventually cycle back through the densities when we're all done, and we're tired, completely tired of getting experience. We're ready to report back home. We'll go home, and everything we have will be downloaded into the Creator, and the Creator will be that much more, but it's already infinite. So anyway, that's the story, and I love that picture of the universe, of the curious Creator and all of us being just as curious, and yet we're bounded by the nature of creation, which is love. We can't get away from it. Either we serve ourselves with it or we serve others with it. Of course, we do both. If you serve others, you cannot help but serve yourself, because bread cast upon the water comes back 1,000-fold. If you serve yourself, you can't help serving others, because you're part of the creation, and everything is serving the Creator. You know, no matter what a huge villain you are, you're still explaining to the Creator just how villainy is, how that works.
And then the polarity, can you explain that a bit more? Because, you know, speaking of the villain and then speaking of love,
yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about polarity?
Well, I think that is the thorniest of all the problems, is why did the Creator allow us to suffer so much? And well, this is the density of polarity. This is the density of the great choice. How shall we serve? We're here. We have power. How will we use the power? And can I help? My husband's stopping by. And whether it's power over one other person, like for a mother or father, or a husband and wife, or power in a relationship, or whether it's power over a nation, it's the same thing. The issues are the same. The ethics are the same. Issues are the same. Well, will we try to cooperate and work together? Or will I decide to use you, toss you away if I don't need you, and manipulate you for my own use if I do need you? So that's the basic nature of polarity, as I see it, is how we choose to use power. And those who choose to use...
I just said I see, yeah, the power,
Yeah. Those who use power to serve others are generally those that fly under the radar. They're not famous for the most part. Now you get somebody like Martin Luther King or Mahatma Gandhi, and they have risen to the level of flying above the radar. They've affected the fate of nations. But for the most part, good people don't get a lot of power on that level because they're not interested. They have no hunger for the games that people generally play in order to amass power. They're not interested in more and more power. So they're not famous. They don't get well known. And they're, for the most part, they're everybody we know who will give you the shirt off their back, who make cookies for bake sales and kiss their kids goodbye in the morning and glad to see them when they come home. You know, I mean, just regular people. And for the most part, they might not be smart. They might not have gone to college. They might not have benefits. They might be disadvantaged. They might be terribly poor. But They love people. They love their family. They love their nation. They love, they're loyal. They have ethics. They know what's right and wrong, or they want to. They want to do the right thing. And that kind of person is making it into the next density. In the kingdom of the heart, it's not what you know, it's who you are.
Right.
No matter how much you know, if you haven't opened your heart and started serving other people and getting your kicks from making other people happy and seeing good things happen for others. Donating to Red Cross. It's not hard to be of service. Every city in the world has soup kitchens. You can go and fix food for people, whoever you are, wherever you are. You can always help. There's always an old folks home to go and sit and talk to the people that don't have anybody. There's always something you can do. When people, I hear, I'm at an age now where my friends have a tendency to say, well, I just don't have anything to do anymore. All my kids are gone and they're not anywhere and I can't visit with my grandchildren. I don't have anything to do. And I said, well, have you thought about, you got your house, why don't you go visit people that don't have anybody? Why don't you go take people to the grocery that can't go for themselves? Take them to the doctor. I don't know. I don't think I really want to. Well, I don't know people. Well, just find out, is there something within walking distance? You have an old folks home you can walk to. Walk over there every day. Spend a half hour, an hour, whatever you got. You'll get to know everything real quick, You'll find out who needs your help. If you don't know what to say, offer foot massage. Everybody will take a foot massage.
Exactly.
You can always be of service, is what I'm saying. There's not a problem with being of service. We all basically know the fundamentals of what being of service can mean, Before you get sophisticated, is somebody hungry? Feed them. Is somebody cold? Warm them up.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody homeless? Get them under shelter.
Right.
This is not difficult.
Right.
Folks.
I read.
So, being of service is a very basic, we really understand what it is to be of service, whether we intellectually say, well, I don't, know exactly what right and wrong is. We know it when we see it. We can smell it. And we can smell the things that are not of service. Corporations, where, you kill very competitively to get at that next rung. You know about that. You were in that very competitive, busy New York stuff for 15 years. That's tough stuff.
Yeah.
People are slaughtering each other to get the next rung on the ladder.
Very mean-spirited, the politics. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there are politics everywhere. You go to church, there are politics. You can't get away from it. So, no sense being disillusioned by that, because it's just human nature. But you don't have to be part of it.
I was inspired to be of service after I read a book by Ram Dass called Path of Service. And after hearing his work with hospice patients, I was inspired to join a hospice group at Kaiser Hospital. And it was quite remarkable, the events that unfolded after that. I took the hospice course, and about 4 weeks into it, I came home and my husband asked if it would be okay if his dying mother move in with us. And so the hospice group leader said that I wouldn't be able to take on a hospice patient through Kaiser as long as I had someone in my home who needed, my hospice care. So I dedicated, my energy to being there for his mother and father while she was dying from cancer. And just 2 weeks after she passed in our home, my father moved in because he had just finished chemotherapy treatment and was very, very ill from the chemo. And so then he stayed in our home and was eventually then moved. He moved back up to Canada to be with my mother. They're Canadians. And after a year of fighting cancer, he just passed away maybe 10 days ago. And
Well, my
oh,
sympathies.
thank you. I was able to sit by his bedside, Carla, and, help to surround him with light. And it was just so remarkable after being inspired to serve all of these opportunities, tremendous opportunities to serve that unfolded the moment I made the decision to serve, to open myself to service.
Do it. Yes.
I found that.
Boy, be careful what you ask for.
Exactly.
Huh?
Isn't that the truth? And another thing that occurred was that my father, who has always claimed to be a scientist, in fact, he, if asked what his religion was, would say science. So after he almost died from the chemo treatments and moved into my home, he was aware that I was spiritually seeking, and he came down to the breakfast table one morning and said, "Bring it on. I just, faced my mortality, and I'm ready. It's time for me to open to spirituality." And I gave him David Wilcock's book, and he listened to that on audio tape. I mean, I think that's about a 14-hour audio tape, and he listened to it intensely and was incredibly moved by it, and that led me to introducing him to the Law of One books, which he read, and then the Urantia book.
Oh.
And in the Urantia book, he read just the part about the life and times of Jesus. And so this was right before he entered into his last couple months, and he told my sister that he saw Jesus and he was surrounded by angels. And this was about a week before he passed. And so I just felt like that was an incredible opportunity for me to present him with that, material.
Yes.
And so it just, the synchronistic unfolding of events is found.
That is beautiful. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Oh.
I like to share those kind of stories, Carla, because your influence is very important in that story. Your Law of One books, and
I'm so glad. I just feel so glad when you take the information and run with it the way you have. You really worked the programs, as they say.
Right.
Congratulations on getting it and living it. You can't just know it. You've got to live it. And being true to who you are. So you really just live it. And whatever comes to you in your process, you go within, you pray, you ask, and then you receive guidance, and then you act on the guidance, and then that becomes real for you, and the process jumps ahead into the next step. But ahead of time, you have no idea what that's going to be. You get to the suffering, and you're going, "Lord, I am truly suffering here. This is the dark night of the soul. Please, I'm stuck. What shall I do?" And then the light dawns, the morning breaks, and you have a plan. All of a sudden, stay in the desert, help other people heal, and heal yourself. And there you go. And that's the next 15 years. And then, 15 years later, then you've got to start asking again. And then you take another leap forward from the suffering. And it seems to be built on suffering. It seems to be built on these very difficult times when we have choices to make about how best to serve and how best just to go on. And as we seek for how to serve and what to focus on, then I think we do receive the guidance that we need, and things become magical. And I think it's really important, the part of being hollowed out. You have to let yourself be hollowed out by suffering so that you can hold the Creator's joy, the Creator's purpose, the Creator's message, whatever is in it, whatever there is in your, coming up for you. You hollow yourself out, and you create a chalice of yourself that holds the living water. And then you go to the well and you say, feed me. I'm so thirsty, please, and you receive. And the more that you've suffered, the bigger cup you have, and the more you can drink.
That's a beautiful
The more you can
analogy,
give back.
Carla. I really like that analogy. It makes the suffering worthwhile, right?
I think so. I think that's what it's all about. It's so that we come to choice, and we're forced almost into a choice, a point of choice. And then we ask, help me with this. I am totally bewildered. What shall I do? And that asking is so important. And you've done it. You've done the right thing. You've asked. And you've received. And I think that point of asking, and not just depending on, let me figure it out. No. Stop and ask. Because guidance is right there, but you've got to ask. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. It's right there in the Bible, as clear as any parable ever is. You've got to ask. It's the free will. See, that free will comes up again. In order to receive from Spirit, you have to ask.
Open yourself up to it and surrender, right? Mm-hmm. Well,
the good guys won't horn in and say, do this.
Yeah.
So that really is what I understand about polarity. I hope you get that from all of my maundering.
Absolutely.
Talking.
Every word is precious, Carla, and your analogies are beautiful. Before we go, I want to ask one last question about the Earth's shift into the fourth density. Now that we've, gone past the winter solstice of 2012, and maybe you can share with me a little bit about, the status of the Earth's energy.
Well, I think Earth is in fourth density now. It has moved on, and we are receiving fourth density light. And fourth density light contains a lot more information. It's a lot denser. That's why they call them density. Every density is more dense with information, more dense with light. And so we're receiving more information than we can really process with our poor old third density body. And that's, I think, why a lot of people are having so much trouble all of a sudden. Because life has changed, and we are still third density. But fourth density is a state of mind. We have always been able to achieve fourth density in our mind, in our heart. So in order to make use of fourth density light, while our third density because when we go to the well, like I was talking about, and ask for enough for today, just give me enough for today, lift me up. When you're being lifted up, you can feel it come in. You can feel it. Yes, there it is. It's within me. I feel it. Consciousness is a much higher density. We are higher density creatures within ourselves. It's our bodies that the DNA is not geared to be so high. And that's good. I mean, it's third density. We needed that. We needed this. And we're getting to the point where older souls, we don't really need it anymore. We don't need it to be hit upside the head. We get it before that point, you know. But I think that's the way to look at the look at this as an opportunity, because a lot more information from spirit is really available. But the problem is you get so much information, and all of a sudden, like you said, my God, I wanted to serve by doing hospice, and I got 2 older people that were sick as dogs, and I had to clean up their poop and their vomit, and you know, don't know if I was actually ready for all that. You know? Well, that's the problem. You know, you look at a person, and not only do you see that person, and you see what's wrong with that person, quote unquote, in terms of that person's distortions being serviced to self, you realize that's me in there. She's a mirror showing me what I look like when I'm in this mood. I have a part of myself want to admit that I'm looking at out there, and that's me too, and that's hard. You know, instead of judging other people, just say, I am now going to work on myself. I'm not going to judge that other person. I'm going to work on myself in order to heal myself, integrate that into myself, and forgive myself for being that way. Because I'm not going to stop being that way. If we are everything, every emotion, every person, everything we meet, which we would have to be, all part of the Creator, and that's one thing. If we are all one, then that means we're never going to get rid of the part that's the thief, the murderer. We simply have to ask those parts to come into the light with us and to work for us. And then love that part and protect and respect and accept that part and forgive that part. And take that part in. You're integrating. You're bringing all of that into the light. And when you finally can do that, you fall in love with yourself. You see what a brave soul you are. How wonderful how great you've been. You've done tremendous things with what you've been given. And you just have to say out loud, I really love myself. and you just, and you become healed, and your incarnation is healed. And at that point, you can see other people with a lot more forgiveness and acceptance. And, it makes a huge difference. But you have to fall in love with yourself first. That's the real important step.
I made a shift toward that when I had a realization that the Creator was within me, and I was able to look in the mirror and see the Creator looking back at me. And I felt a strong love for the Creator, and so that translated into a love for myself.
Yes.
And then, of course, you see the Creator in others, and you are having a conversation with somebody, and you're thinking, I'm having a conversation with the Creator. So it's right together, you're just one.
It's like, OMG.
Yeah, I know. How fortunate am I? Well, this has been a remarkable exchange of love and light, Carla. I'm so blessed.
Oh, it's been a joy. Thank you very much, too. And I know your book's going to be terrific.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to cherish this time together for all time.
Thank you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Please join me in bowing our heads with deep love and gratitude for the late Carla Rueckert and her beautiful, sweet soul.